Metroid Prime is back. After almost 2 decades of waiting, the next game in the series, Metroid Prime 4, has finally been released, and people are f***ing furious about it. Okay, that's kind of an exaggeration, but the discourse about Prime 4 has been very polarized. Some people have been acting like the game is the next Other M, while others have been defending the game as if the franchise is gonna die again. Guys, don't worry, the Metroid Prime series was never completely dead, it was just forgotten. Prime 4 is definitely a weird game, which is probably why the opinions on it have been so mixed. So I'm here to settle things and give you the objectively correct opinion about Metroid Prime 4. And if you don't agree, you will be sentenced to playing Metroid Prime Federation Force. Metroid Prime 4 starts off on a Galactic Federation research facility that's under attack by the menacing bounty hunter Sylux. Finally, that post-credits scene from 2007 is paying off. One of the coolest things about this game is the graphics. I know literally every review of Prime 4 has talked about how good the graphics are. Like, wait, you're telling me good graphics are good? But really, this has to be some of the most detailed graphics we've ever gotten in a Nintendo game. It's a really good showcase for the Switch 2's hardware. Please give us Prime 2 and 3 remastered. Anyways, Samus and the Galactic Federation fight through waves of space pirates before having an encounter with Sylux himself. But the encounter only lasts a few seconds, until Sylux shoots a mysterious artifact. The artifact transports Samus and several Federation troopers to a planet called Viros. And of course, as usual for Metroid games, Samus loses all of her upgrades, and you have to get them back throughout the course of the game. After arriving on Viros, Samus wanders through a mysterious tower created by a race called the Lemorn. She finds a special crystal that allows her to use psychic abilities and interact with Lemorn technology. Samus encounters a recording left by a Lemorn priest. The priest basically tells Samus that she's the chosen one spoken of in an ancient prophecy, and that she will be the one to save the legacy of the Lemorn people. That's weird. The guy outside McDonald's told me that too, and he tried to give me some psychic crystals. The priest tells Samus about 5 keys that can be used to activate the Master Teleporter, which will teleport Samus and the Federation back home. Samus is then sent to Fury Green, and this is where the game really begins. Fury Green is the first of 5 major areas the game will have you explore. Each of these areas are pretty isolated from each other, with no paths directly connecting them. Because of that, the areas feel kinda linear. They almost feel more like Zelda dungeons, rather than pieces of one big, interconnected map like other Metroid games. The linearity of the game is one of the first points of contention that people have with Prime 4. Some people miss that interconnected world map of the first 2 Prime games. And yeah, I kinda agree with them on that. It's not necessarily bad to have linear design. I mean, at the end of the day, every Metroid game is trying to push you in a particular direction. But what makes Metroid games feel so special is that the exploration feels natural. The game gives you the illusion that you're freely exploring the world, and hides the fact that you're being nudged down a specific path. And unfortunately, Prime 4 struggles to keep up that illusion. It's usually pretty obvious that you're being taken down a specific path, sometimes a literal straight line. Does that inherently make the dungeons bad? No. They're actually pretty decent. But they lack some of the magic that Metroid games have, which is probably one of the worst things I could say about a Metroid game. Now, all these dungeons have to be connected in some way, and that's where the biggest issue with Prime 4 comes in. Each of the major areas is connected by one large open desert called Soul Valley. To help traverse the desert, Samus gets a motorcycle called Viola. So what's the point of putting a giant desert in the game? Why would they want to add a motorcycle to a Metroid game? So that I dispose of my disposable income? Soul Valley feels like a pretty worthless addition to the game. It's obvious that the developers wanted to include Soul Valley to make the game feel more open world. In some ways, it kinda reminds me of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. In those games, you get a massive open world to explore, with lots of stuff to do in between the main dungeons. Breath of the Wild's map is filled with tons of things to discover, like shrines, Korok puzzles, villages, towers, enemy camps, and so much more. Not to mention the beautiful vistas and varied terrain of Hyrule. It's a place you want to explore, and a place you naturally get immersed in. Soul Valley fails at basically all of those things. There's not much of anything to find in the desert. There's 6 little shrine puzzles that give you some kinda useless upgrades. Wait, so Prime 4 has 6 shrines. How many does Breath of the Wild have? 120? Okay, granted, Soul Valley is not quite as big as Hyrule and Breath of the Wild, but that almost gives it less of an excuse to feel so empty. There's less space to fill up, and yet it still feels like there's nothing to be found for miles. And of course, it doesn't help that Soul Valley looks so boring. It's just a bunch of f***ing sand.
You see this? Huh? Sis? This is sand. Yeah. It's sand. You know it's gonna be 100 years from now, huh? It's gonna be sand!
The only other things that can be found in the desert are these green crystals that you can smash and collect. Why is this game so obsessed with crystals? Do we need to get Samus an intervention? These crystals bring up another issue with the game though. What are these crystals for, you may ask? Well, to be able to even beat the game, you have to collect a certain amount of green crystals. That's okay though, they're not that hard to collect. Just smash them up with your motorcycle. It's as simple as that. Okay, so how many crystals did I just collect? That's weird. I thought I collected some green crystals. I guess maybe I didn't get any. Wait a minute, that's how much I got? You have to collect a lot of green crystals, and they're found almost exclusively in Soul Valley. It's almost like the developers knew that Soul Valley had nothing in it, so they lazily scattered a bunch of crystals around and required you to spend hours collecting them. I still can't believe they found a way to add grinding to a Metroid game. And it's not even the good kind of grinding. Honestly, if I wasn't forced to drive around the desert to find all these green crystals, then Soul Valley wouldn't be much of a bother at all. But the fact that you're required to go around and smash green crystals just to even beat the game only exacerbates the problems with Soul Valley. It's such a dumb and unnecessary requirement. But the game at least gives you some rewards for collecting crystals. 3 rewards. One of them is a beam upgrade. The other 2 don't matter. Also, you have to drive all the way back to Fury Green to claim your prize. The one plus side to the green crystal quest is that it can actually be a bit relaxing to go around and smash crystals. Go ahead, put a podcast or a video on in the background. F*** it, put one of my videos on while you're driving around this place. I have no shame plugging myself. Metroid Prime 4's open world is just so boring compared to other open world games. I know I've been comparing the game a lot to Breath of the Wild, which probably isn't fair considering Prime 4 isn't primarily an open world game, but at times it feels like the game really wants to be open world and borrow elements from Breath of the Wild specifically. The problem is, Prime 4 doesn't understand what makes open world games fun. You can't have an interesting world if there isn't anything to explore in the world. It's kind of strange considering how Metroid has always been about exploration, and this game has pretty weak exploration in both the linear dungeons and the open world. Soul Valley really drags down the game. I mean, I can sort of defend the linear dungeons, but Soul Valley sucks. However, there's another addition that Prime 4 brings that's extremely controversial, perhaps even more controversial than Soul Valley. Metroid Prime 4 adds me as a character. You might recall that when Samus got teleported to Viros, a bunch of Galactic Federation troopers were transported there too. Well, you'll encounter these troopers throughout the game, and they'll help you through some of the dungeon areas. The reason people are upset about this is because they're concerned that having NPCs with voice dialogue will break the immersion of Metroid. Some people have defended the NPCs, pointing out that previous Metroid Prime games have had NPCs before. Specifically, Metroid Prime 3 had Federation troopers that you could interact with and that had voice dialogue. But what Prime 4 does differently is that the NPCs talk to you throughout the whole game. In Prime 3, the times where you're interacting with NPCs are pretty separate from the core gameplay. On the other hand, in Prime 4, the NPCs follow you and talk to you for most of your time in the dungeons. There's one NPC in particular that people despise. His name is Miles Mackenzie. You meet him pretty early in the game, and spend most of your time in Fury Green with him. His dialogue is very quippy, almost like something you'd hear in a Marvel movie, and a lot of people feel like Miles' dialogue is pretty annoying.
It's about to get real nerdy in here.
But in my opinion, his dialogue is bad. It's bad. I'm not even going to try and defend it. But I will argue that the rest of the NPCs aren't that bad. They're not good, but they all have pretty normal dialogue. It's not like Tokabi's going around making fart jokes while Samus is fighting for her life. The other NPCs definitely aren't as offensive as Miles. Actually, you know what? I'll say it. I kinda like Miles. I mean, come on. He's literally me. Wait, what the f***? Okay, I like Mackenzie ironically, and the other NPCs are fine, but I will admit that their presence feels kinda strange, especially for a Metroid game. It seems like the developers added these characters to try and make Prime 4 feel more cinematic and story-based compared to other Metroid games. Most Metroid games. And I think it's an interesting direction to go in, that has a lot of potential. But the problem is that Prime 4's NPCs aren't strong enough to drive an impactful story. I know I've sort of been defending the NPCs, but they're definitely not creating the compelling narrative that the developers wanted them to. The characters just aren't very fleshed out. They don't go through any growth or character arc, and because of that, the narrative can't go very far. There's one character in particular I think needs more development. But before I go any further, I should give you a spoiler warning. If you really give a shit about the story for this game, then go to this timestamp. Okay, that's your warning. Remember Sylux? Remember how I said that post-credits scene from 2007 is paying off? Well, actually it didn't. Sylux is barely in this game, despite being the main villain who was set up almost 20 years ago. Most of the times he appears in the game, he's not even real. It's a fake clone of him. Sylux himself only appears like twice, maybe 3 times in the whole game. And if you want to learn the lore behind Sylux, you either have to 100% the game, or spend $30 on the Sylux amiibo. Will Nintendo put me in jail if I just watched on YouTube? Basically, Sylux used to be a soldier for the Galactic Federation. During a massive battle, Sylux disobeys the orders of his commander, and tries to seize a space pirate weapon before Samus can swoop in and be the hero. Except, Sylux gets everyone killed trying to seize the weapon, leaving him as one of the only survivors. Samus arrives, and offers to help Sylux up, but he says, "Shut up, bitch." Yeah, I was pretty surprised they added swear words to this game too. But that's Sylux's origin for you. It's interesting, but I wish they developed Sylux more during the actual game. And I wish this cutscene wasn't a completion bonus / paid unlock, especially since Sylux has more story in this 3-minute cutscene than he does in the rest of the game. It's not just Sylux though, all of the characters in this game could use more development. The Federation troopers you befriend feel pretty one-note. They don't have much of a backstory or motivation. I mean, they can be kind of interesting at times, but I'm not that invested in them. Which kinda sucks, because at the end of the game, all the Federation troopers you met sacrificed themselves so that Samus can escape Viros. Holy shit, they actually did kill Mackenzie. I did not think they had the balls to do that. This scene is supposed to be a very emotional moment, but they really could have done a better job of fleshing out these characters so that their deaths felt more tragic. That's basically all you need to know about the story of Prime 4. It's not terribly compelling, and it's definitely not a motivating factor to play the game. I feel like most modern Nintendo games just aren't good at telling a very compelling story. I mean, just look at Tears of the Kingdom, for example. Here's a bunch of faceless, no-name sages that spout the same garbage dialogue every time you encounter them.
Come, Demon King, Secret Stone.
Come, Demon King, Secret Stone.
Come, Demon King, Secret Stone.
Come,
Please give a shit.
Demon King, Secret Stone.
Prime 4 is just another example of Nintendo not being able to write a very gripping story, which isn't a huge deal, I guess. Not all games need to be driven by their story, but it feels really pointless to add all these characters and all this dialogue to the game, only to not tell much of a story with it. I'd argue that the inclusion of NPCs in the game wouldn't have been so controversial if the writing wasn't so weak. Weak is a pretty good word to describe Prime 4 as a whole. It has a weak storyline, it's weak as a shooter game, it's flat out bad as an open world game, and worst of all, it's a pretty weak Metroid game. It's not a terrible game overall, but it's not very good at most of the things it's trying to do. It feels like a bunch of half-hearted attempts at new gimmicks that weaken the core Metroid gameplay with how they're implemented. Honestly, I don't think the dungeons would have been so linear if the developers weren't trying to wedge a giant desert in between them, or add helper NPCs to the game. If I had to sum up all of Prime 4's issues in one sentence, it'd be that the game doesn't know what it wants to be. And I think that's why the game had such a troubled development, because even the developers didn't know what they wanted this game to be. In one interview, the developers at Nintendo were talking about how fans wanted an open-world Metroid game, but the developers felt that the free exploration of open-world games wasn't compatible with Metroid's structured progression. So the developers created Soul Valley to emulate the feel of an open-world game without changing the Metroid formula. What I'm trying to get at with this is that it seems like the developers wanted to implement new elements to the game, but they didn't want to change the Metroid formula. But the problem is, the new elements they're trying to introduce don't work well with what Metroid should be, according to the Metroid formula. Open world gameplay isn't compatible with traditional Metroid progression, and a storyline with NPCs isn't really compatible with Metroid's atmosphere. But instead of trying to innovate the Metroid formula, they just shoehorned all these new elements into a traditional Metroid game and prayed that they worked. That's why all the elements of Prime 4 feel so weak. It's because the new style of gameplay they're trying to introduce doesn't really pair well with traditional Metroid gameplay, so the two styles just kind of cancel each other out, leaving a pretty bland game. For the next Metroid Prime game, the developers need to commit to one style. Either they need to change the Metroid formula and make a new kind of Metroid game, or they need to ditch all the new stuff and try and make the most refined traditional Metroid Prime they can. I don't care how long it takes to get Metroid Prime 5. I just want the developers to learn from Prime 4. I want the next game to have a distinct vision, because the lack of commitment is what ultimately dragged down Prime 4. So what's my final verdict on Prime 4? I know I've said a lot of very critical things about this game, and there's even more problems that I haven't addressed, but I also think it's a bit hyperbole to call the game awful. Dare I say, it's not even bad. You'll still have a decent time playing it, but it is true that Prime 4 is a very flawed game. It doesn't help that the expectations for Prime 4 were through the roof. Not only have we been waiting for almost 2 decades for this game, but it's also the newest entry in a very prestigious series. Out of the original 3 Prime games, Metroid Prime 3 is the lowest rated, and it still has a 90 on Metacritic. So yeah, taken on its own, Prime 4 is a pretty average game, but when you're comparing it to the other 3 games, which are widely regarded as masterpieces, yeah, it does seem pretty bad in comparison. And that's the reason why Prime 4 has been so polarizing. It's because Metroid fans are disappointed with Prime 4 when compared to the other 3 games. As a result, some people have been very frustrated with Prime 4, while others have been more defensive of the game. But the thing that both sides have in common is that they're disappointed with the game. And that's something I had to deal with when I was writing this video. Initially, I was pretty defensive of Prime 4, and you can probably see remnants of that throughout this video. But as I kept writing, and as I listened to other people's criticism of the game, I started to rethink my opinion. I realized that if I wanted to give an unbiased review of this game, I had to recognize the flaws with this game, and admit that I was disappointed with it. Still, I think after the initial disappointment wears off, people will look at Prime 4 a bit more favorably. Is it as good as the other games? No, nothing will be as good as Metroid Prime Pinball, but I still think it's a decent game, and I hope that the next Prime game will be even better, just as long as the developers understand what kind of game they want to make. Wait a minute, the guy who voices Duke in Prime 4 also voices the Doomslayer? I think I just realized what kind of game Retro should have made all along.
It's about to get real nerdy in here.